What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team.
Couple of days thinking like I'm not going to be able to do all this, or I'm basically I'm not going to be able to do all this, and that's like but by lunchtime or 4 p.m. I've done it all.
We are live, so now the whole team knows you're bitching about something, and we're all here to support you.
It's like a humble brag. Oh, Larry, you ever been this busy, dude? Ugh.
Oh,
delivering so much value.
it hurts your shoulders, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, we are. Let's kick this thing off. I've got a big time guest here today. His name's Rob Bogart. That's his chin, and he wins the award. I introduce him the same way every single time. He wins the award of the most disagreeable person I know. Super close, one of my best buds, and I've been trying to get him on here for the last few years, and he's finally here. Welcome, my friend.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Sorry, little technical difficulties. I couldn't get it to work on my computer, so we're using my phone, so my bad.
Right. Yeah, no, it's all good. This app, for some reason, gives a lot of people problems, including myself. So we're probably going to be changing it at some point. It's just there's a lot going on right now, so trying to not change a handful of things right now that I know I do have to change. Anyway, interesting topic I've heard come up from Jordan Peterson quite a bit, and he was asked in a lecture, what are the most essential skills? And this was a room of, I think it was Harvard college students, and I thought what he said was really fundamental and easy at one level and then really profound at another level. And he said, number one skill you can learn is to write, because writing is thinking. And then he said, pick a problem to write about that you're curious about, and then read to find the answer, and then summarize what you read, and then think through it and whether or not you agree or disagree with it. Larry, what comes up for you when I say that?
It's reminds me of, for me, starting out with the outcome. What is it I'm ultimately attempting to achieve? And then as I address that, I start working backwards and start writing about, this is going to need to be done, that's going to need to be done. What if this happens? What if that happens? By starting out with what I want to accomplish and going backwards, as opposed to starting out with what I think I can accomplish and talk myself out of it along the way, because, you'd have to do that. No, I don't have that resource. And sometimes when you don't think you have the resource, you forget how resourcul you are. And so that's kind of how I go about learning. And then I'll get online, or I'll ask ChatGPT, or I'll Wikipedia it, or I'll read articles and start to get as many perspectives on what other people's point of view is on that, and approach it. That's kind of how I approach creating new courses or creating resolution that people have in their own lives.
Do you, Ray, have a process for writing? Because one of the things that I've noticed you do an excellent job of is almost every time we're talking, you're taking notes. Mm-hmm. Have you found any sort of process that works for you?
Well, no, I think that writing, the kind of cliche that when you write something down, you remember it better. I think that is I get the most utility out of writing in that way. I write down everything in a notebook. I know it's very analog, but I got the date in the top corner, and then I've got my scorecard, right, that I check off, and then the rest is just notes. It's just something I can flip back to. If like, did I make a payment on the 12th? I know a lot of us these days can pull that information up on a Google Doc or Excel spreadsheet or something. But for me, the act of writing, again, like, so I have a thought, and it is basically like the Scrabble tiles in the bag, right? So it's just like bouncing around my head. Writing it down helps to refine the thought. And really, I just write down everything. And then something else that came to mind, Wes, if I can say so, it's like, I haven't seen that clip by Jordan Peterson in a while, but writing, reading, and then writing, right? Correct? Writing, pick a problem, read to understand or solve it, and then write to share your answer, to share your wisdom. It doesn't even have to be right. Again, I think just sharing your answer is the third step that can take multiple forms, right? Because like you and I and Larry and Handsome, like I don't know about him, but like the three of us share our wisdom mostly on video these days, right? We share the answer verbally or visually, and so for me, I'm not really good at sharing my wisdom or sharing my answer via the written form. I wish I aspire to do better at that, but for now, it is just a kind of problem-solving calculator function for me, writing.
Yeah, I think it's really important to get in a little bit of detail here, because when you say read or write or think, those are just so vague sometimes to people that it's just not instructional. I have found different mental models and linguistic models and thinking patterns to be unbelievably helpful in shortcutting solutions. So one of the ways that I read a book, especially if it's a more technical book, is quite literally summarizing paragraph by paragraph and making hierarchies and decision trees and so on. If I could convince anybody of one thing in terms of when they're reading something important, it's to do that, to deconstruct the entire book. It takes you easily 10 times as long, but then you actually understand the book. Almost to the point of summarizing paragraph by paragraph, page by page, chapter by chapter, and then you can have eventually a one-page summary of all of those summaries. It's tedious as absolute hell. It takes exponentially longer, but man, you come out a different person on the other end of the book. That's why I think it's so important to actually have a filter at the top of the funnel for it. The filter that I use is, even if somebody recommends to me a book, I go and I say, okay, what category of thing do I want to learn? I think psychology is worth it for every person on this earth to learn. It's unbelievably important. I actually struggle to think of a more important topic. So let's just say psychology. Okay, great. Well, what are the top 5 books in psychology? I do 2 different ways of going about that. I go to Google and I type in literally top books in psychology. Now, there are subcategories, top categories in persuasion, top categories in trauma, etc. I'm sorry, top books in trauma, top books in persuasion. Then from there, I cross-pollinate it, go over to Amazon. Find an Amazon, okay, are those books on those lists from Google congruent with the Amazon list? The Amazon's a little more difficult because depending on what genre you're reading, especially business, the authors can really game the system. I mean, there's a lot of business books out there, especially now, that just have a large following on their social media channels. So when they write a book, they basically instantly have an Amazon, if not New York Times bestseller, because they've got 500,000 people on their list, if not more. So you got to be really careful with that. So now you've already done the legwork. You've removed 97% of the potential books that you could read, and you're focusing on the handful that are left. From there, I do three things. Get the Audible, get some version of the summary, whether it be from Blinkist or there's other providers out there. And then the third is I actually get the digital Kindle book. And then from all three of I'll listen to the book first, and then I will start to read the book, and then I get the Blinkist version, and then I go through by hand or computer and do the method that I just said. Ridiculously tedious, but if your goal is to increase the way you think, right, at, in my opinion, an exponential rate, even though reading the book is slower, I think that's the way to do it. Rob, do you have any structure or models that you use to consume information?
Please say no.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with you. Like, I definitely take a lot of notes in the margins, but you bring up a good point. Like, I think I could be better at it. A lot of information I consume nowadays, I know you're not going to get as much from it, but it's still a good way to pique your interest or get little bits of tidbit. And I know it's super modern and people might not realize, but sometimes Instagram shorts or like YouTube reels or whatever those are, like, you can get a lot of good information fairly quickly. And then what I'll do is that'll give me a good basis of what I want to learn, or at least research. And then I'll do more of a deep dive. But in terms of getting information, I think that that's potentially a new way that especially the younger generation is going to get a lot of information. With you and the more like academic approach, I'd love to try that to better understand some of these more esoteric books, like that Please Understand Me Now book that I've been trying to read. That, man, it's just so esoteric that this is a good strategy that I think I should try to employ, and I appreciate that you shared it.
Yeah, man, that book and a handful of others. I want to go round robin here, see what the most life-changing books for you guys have been. First of all, be careful. I get this feedback all the time, and it drives me through a roof. Oh, you can't just get the information from books. I fucking know that. Like, just for everybody who's going to give me that information, that feedback in the future, I'm gonna send them this episode. I am very much aware that all of the world's secrets do not exist in books. I just happen to think that 99% of them do. So if I can go and read from Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and whoever else who they've already created enormous businesses, I'm going to imagine that I will benefit from reading their stuff, especially if the opportunity cost is watching the next Netflix drama, right? So, Rob.
I was going to say the inverse of that's true as well. Like, if you're watching something or you're taking something as fact and it's like a Joe Schmo just telling you, and then they link something to the study, I do think that you should do your own research on that study. And even though it might be dense, a lot of times those studies are super important to get their accurate information, not someone's interpretation of it. So like you, dude, you've helped. Anytime you say something, I take it with value because I know you know what you're talking about, like all those other individuals. But the inverse is true too. Like, you can't take some of that information as fact without doing some research unless they're credible people.
Yeah, and let me ask you, just to set the stage for you, Rob, if you don't mind me saying this. Just so everybody knows, I invited Rob up on here because he's one of my best friends, like I told you. And I will protect his information. But Rob has done literally, Rob, how many, if you had to describe it in dollar amounts, how many transactions have you done in your business measured in dollars, just roughly?
And like gross, like loan volume for mortgages, probably like close to a 600 million, 700 million.
Yeah. So absolute killer. That's why he's on here. So similarly, forehead score, pay attention to the stuff that he says. Because I know he looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but super smart guy. So Larry Olson, let me throw this over to you, pal. Most life-changing or impactful book that you've ever read?
I think I shared that within an earlier show. It was in college, and it was in a laundromat, and I picked up a book that somebody had left, and it was now what the heck was it? It was
that profound.
It was that profound that I'll never forget the title
50
again.
Shades of Grey?
How'd you know? Come back to me.
All right. Ray, let's throw it over to you, bro. Most impactful book. Hey, dudes. Sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah, just to riff on Rob, I know that Wes has a kind of like required reading list, right? That includes Please Understand Me by Kiersey, Influence, The Art of and Science of Persuasion by Cialdini. Body Keeps the Score is probably your trauma book, Wes.
100%.
Business, I Love Capitalism is up there.
Ken Langone, yeah.
And then Craft, The War of Art. I love The War of Art personally. Like, that's the one I've read multiple times. Just for the simple, the best distilled idea in there is that inside the head of every successful and unsuccessful person, there is the resistance telling them, don't go on that diet, sit on the couch and eat cheeseburgers. Don't create that business. Don't take that risk. You're just...
Sorry, Ray, your internet. Rob, let me throw it over to you, bro. Most profound book.
My most profound book, it's a book called Mindsight. And similarly to some of the things that you've actually very recently brought to light, it was kind of my first introduction to like the human psychology and how it evolved and how it relates to physiology and all those things. Like when I read it, it clicked. It made a lot of sense. I think everyone should read it because I think it can explain a lot about who we are as humans, like DNA wise, like evolutionary wise, and how that relates to how we're feeling and how we act in an everyday situation. It's a great book.
Yeah. Yeah. Any particular gems you took out of it that you could recall?
Well, one thing that I really felt helped me in my life is I generally feel if I get to a point of no return with anger or frustration or whatever that it may be, this book kind of gave you a reason as to why you feel that way. And that reaction is not something that you should actually engage in, that hormonal response to this stimuli that's not really going to have a positive effect by acting irrationally or emotionally. So it goes a lot about how, like, he calls it the hormonal storm or something like that. We're literally just walking away for 5 minutes, not saying something you don't mean. Like when that level of frustration and anger hits, literally wait 2 minutes, wait 3 minutes, and you'll be in a significantly better place to address the concern or whatever issue that you're dealing with.
Yeah. What is that? I forget what book I read about it, but I believe there's some sort of neurochemical that bathes your brain when you reach a boiling point and get emotionally flooded. I forget what it's called. Do you happen to recall what that chemical is called?
I think there's several, but if there's one specifically, I don't know which one you're referring to.
Yeah, I've got to find. This is now like the third time I've tried to recall what that is. But essentially, from my understanding, when you get emotionally flooded, when anybody gets emotionally flooded, it bathes. What happens in your brain is, I believe, the blood flow is removed from the prefrontal cortex, which that's what allows you to actually think and use judgment, goes and pulls around your limbic system, which that's your animalistic system. And then I believe your brain is bathed in some sort of neurochemical that does not get relieved for, I think, roughly 20 minutes.
Talking about cortisol?
What is it?
Cortisol?
No, I don't think so. I remember reading it and I was like, oh, that's a word I've never heard before. I'll have to do some more research for you guys. But the point is, it clicked for me that it was mechanical and not emotional, if that makes sense. When I started to understand that oftentimes emotion is a function of mechanics and not like spirituality, if that makes sense. It's like literally flipping on a light switch and on and off. Oh, okay, well, if you're in this frame of mind and you're emotionally flooded, the switch is off. It is not possible to see anything when the switch is off, right? And from my recollection, it's like, oh, it takes 20 minutes for that switch to go back on. Solving anything inside of that 20 minutes is basically not possible. If you read the book, what the hell is it called? We've talked about it on here before. Never Split the Difference, I think it's called. Never Split the Difference, by the famous FBI negotiator. Yeah, Chris Voss. I actually met him. I met him at the Montage Hotel one time. I totally fangirled out. I asked him to come over to our table and talk for a little bit. And yeah, really cool guy. Phil, any profound books that come to mind during this discussion?
Yeah, I was trying to think of something. I'm not sure. There's a book that I like that I can never remember the title. I lost the title so long ago I can never remember what it is. But it's basically a book about Zen Buddhism and meditation, but it was disguised as it was basically a book about practice, talking about practice. It was this pretty interesting guy. He said that his job is he's like an emergency piano repairman. He works for, he would get a call at like midnight by some producer for like a grand orchestra or whatever, and he would have to go and like tune like a grand piano for an orchestra or whatever, something that's happening tomorrow. And so he basically would have to go in at like on call, like random hours of the day, and do something that he said was like, it's incredibly precise, tune a piano, and also incredibly repetitive. Like it takes like hours and hours. So just something that you need to have focus and patience for a very, very long time in combination. And so he was just talking about, just patience and focus and meditation and stuff. I can never remember the title of that book. I wish I could find it again, but I read it a long time ago.
Yeah, if you get to let us know. Let me update the topic here. Most profound thing any of you have learned in recent history. Larry, throwing the ball to you, brother.
Most profound thing I've learned in recent history?
Yep. Any big ahas with business, with life, with relationships?
I think the most profound thing I've learned is not about me. That it's about whoever I'm dealing with. And if I'm recognizing that in my world, life's a creative force, it's not a discovery force. We already know what we need to know, and we continue to look for information, whether we're reading or whatever we're doing, to either validate the preconceived notions that we have or we discount. And I found that I had gotten argumentative to the point to be right, that it was challenging my relationships, it was challenging my opportunities to grow. And as I began to break through that mental barrier, that limiting belief, I realized something phenomenally profound. And it's amazing to recognize that I already know. And now it's just allowing yourself the opportunity to experience it, to discover it, and to put it into practice. And to me, the answer is to what you already know is you don't know anything. And so it's you're constantly curious, and you constantly want to find what that person's really, really needing and wanting, so that you can be of the ultimate service in any kind of business you find yourself in. And it's really a challenge to stop filtering everything through your own experience and your own understanding. I think that's one of the biggest breakthroughs, which I haven't accomplished completely yet, but I'm definitely aware of it.
Love it. Have any books or videos or relationships helped you evolve that?
Well, the book that I had spaced on, that I picked up when I was very young, was Psycho-Cybernetics, Maxwell.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason it was a big deal to me is when he botched a surgery as a plastic surgeon, and he didn't want to reveal the woman's nose to her because he would be pointed out as not being a great plastic surgeon. So he postponed taking the bandages off, and then ultimately he couldn't postpone any longer. She says, "When do I get to see my nose? I've read books and it should have been healed a week ago at the latest." So he handed her a mirror and she took the bandage off and she looked at it and he looked at her expression and he realized, I'm not going to get any good reviews here. And he totally misread her because she said, I'm beautiful. And it really struck me about the power of perception and how we have to be careful about what we make our mind up about, not only when we look at ourselves in the mirror, but when we look at our business, when we look at our relationships, whatever we look at, how powerful is that perception, which more often than not, the way the brain operates is it responds so quickly from past experience, not necessarily the experience you're actually experiencing.
Yeah, I got to read that book again. That is quite a book to just stumble on. Like for a lot of, I know several people, that's the most profound book that they've ever read. That's pretty wild that you just stumbled on that.
Yeah, it was, just an old paperback sitting there and I still had 30 minutes on dry. So I had time to look. And, I think everything.
What year, Larry?
Pardon?
Do you mind if I ask what the year was?
Yeah, it was 1968.
Wow, and this book's still relevant, Wes? That's awesome.
So Dan Kennedy is arguably, one of the godfathers of small business copywriting. He studied from David Ogilvy, who was I believe, nephew. David Ogilvy. Yeah, it goes up the chain to David Ogilvy, then to Albert or Edward Bernays, who was the nephew of Freud, the psychoanalyst. So that's sort of like the tree that it all goes down through. Anyway, Dan Kennedy, basically credited, from my understanding, his career to that book, that psycho-cybernetics book.
Gonna have to add it to the list.
Yeah. It's been years since I've read it. I mean, it's warning a little bit, like from a certain angle, could be a bit hippy dippy. But
it was an interesting time then.
Yeah. So, and Dan Kennedy, for those of you who don't know, love him or hate him, this guy was like is a god in the small to medium sized business copywriting world, which is basically salesmanship in written form. One of the few seminars that my buddy has gone to where he said like people were showing up in private jets to learn from this guy. So anyway, that's who Dan Kennedy is, and he highly recommends psycho-cybernetics. Honestly, I think he may have even bought the rights to it at some point. But anyway, Rob, most profound thing or aha you've had in recent history?
Well, honestly, it was no more than a week ago. I don't know if you mind me sharing, and you were involved, but honestly, it kind of dovetails from what Larry had said. I just didn't realize that people don't have 100% judgment-free, honest conversations. And there's so much that can be learned from them, but people have these reservations about saying something to people that they love because they're worried about the blowback of what it's going to potentially be perceived by that person. And I realized that you have to have those conversations. Like people really, truly don't understand how important 100% judgment-free, honest conversation is. Because there's things that'll make you feel better getting off your chest and things that person may need to hear. And for whatever reason, there was a disconnect, and it might have been your best friend of 25 years. But like I actually started that practice and made an effort to start having those conversations, and it 100% enriched my life in several different relationships. And Wes kind of led me to that understanding. And I even told Wes some things I was potentially worried to tell him. And it was a really good lesson. And I appreciate that we shared that moment. Like, honestly, it's a really important thing that I think everyone should take the time to explain to people, like judgment-free, 100% honesty. Let's have a talk. Like, let's get to the bottom of it. No misunderstandings. Like, let's just figure out how to bridge this potential gap that we may have that we don't even know.
What's an example of maybe one of those conversations you had as a result of that aha? And what's the texture to that? How was it? Was it difficult? Did it go better or worse than you thought?
Every single time it went better than expected. A lot of them are deeply personal, and I don't know that I could particularly share. But even just telling my brother, like, hey, dude, I fucking love you, man. Like, it's hard for me to do that with my family because it's just not something we did. And I did it, and he really appreciated it. And it felt good to do. And I just wasn't, it sounds simple, but that's one that I'm happy to share. But there are some things that sometimes it's a difficult conversation. I mean, like, to not get too personal, but potentially telling someone that there is an individual that you don't necessarily agree with that has a lot of weight on what the decisions that they make are, or things to that effect. Like, uncomfortable potential conversations. You just have to get it out there and have judgment-free talk. Like, it has to be understood that it's judgment-free.
Yeah, and Rob and I talked about this. I had to have a conversation recently with a really close friend of mine, and talking about his wife and how we were at a group-based thing for an extended period of time, and it was very difficult. Everybody was having a very difficult time being around this person's wife. That is not the most fun conversation, but I had to tell him, right, hey man, I love you and we're super close, but things like this, right, will start to repel probably people around you to the point where the next time they're not going to want to come to something like this. So I'm just telling you, if we could have that conversation, if it's of any benefit to you whatsoever. Now, that conversation had to be baked in a lot of disclaimers, plus the cumulative emotional equity that I had with him prior to that is really important, because otherwise, you could very easily see how that conversation could go south.
Come on, Theo.
So Phil, have you ever had to have any conversations like that where your friendship or relationship is on the line, but you feel like it's the right thing to do to have the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, something like that happened recently. A guy I've known for a long time. He's always just been a very kind of very selfish person in terms of our like friendship. Like a lot of times, like we'll be talking and stuff. We'll be talking on the phone. And, he gets into moods where he's not really paying attention. And then I'll try to end the conversation, and he doesn't want to end the conversation, but he's not really present at all. And,
right now. Yeah, dude. I've been meaning to tell my brother I hate him, Rob, for a while. And,
I have no problem doing that.
Yeah. And but like Rob, like it's interesting that the conversation you had and the author of Cybernetics, like in both situations, like that's the takeaway for me from Larry's anecdote, is that the things that you dwell on and stress on and kind of like ruminate on usually go so much better than your predicted interaction in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's some kind of default, like, and Wes, maybe you can help me on this, or Phil, and maybe you can help me on this. There's some kind of default pessimism that I have about how a traffic interactions go, how a real talk. Like, I find myself 10 times as often, like, preparing what I'm going to say for a violent confrontation, like just emotionally violent, right? Rather than preparing what I'm going to say for like a supportive kind of interaction.
Well, let me just throw this out quick. If you back up a little bit and ask yourself, why am I going to do I think I have to respond to whether it's positive or negative? Why don't I just have a conversation and find out what's going on, what I'm receiving? Because we're prone and conditioned and pre-programmed from evolution or creation, whatever works for you, a brain that is to protect us. We do have a negative leaning. We are picking up information that could be the tiger ready to pounce on us. But what I have found, and that's what I meant by perception and judgment, is I'm going to hear what's going on and ask questions about it. I'm not going to plan ahead on how am I going to react. Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to put a proposal together ahead of time, or I'm not going to do my due diligence, but I'm not going to preconceive what reactions I'm going to get, because my brain will pick up and get me prepared for the worst case scenario. And when I'm doing that, I have got myself into an emotional state that doesn't come from joy or love. It comes from fear. It comes from reluctance to want to pursue or move forward. So, be careful of that, Ray, when you're having those conversations with yourself, because we can't control the circumstance, but we can control how we react to it and how we talk to ourselves about it. And that's a real big choice that we have. And I know you know that.
Yeah, I do. But what I know and what I learned from you, Larry, is different than the well-worn kind of pedal in my head or button in my head,
Sure.
Which is like just the fear or the brace for impact kind of lever in my head. But I think I'm going to try. I've got 3 hours of driving ahead of me today. And then next time I go into a big room, I'm going to try to imagine a Greek wedding breaking out with like the clapping and the smashing of the glasses and stuff. And, it's putting a smile on my face right now, just kind of like, imagining it. And so that.
Well, remember how I feel about try.
So, I'm putting the world on notice that the next time I come in a big room, I'm going to shout "Opa," okay, and start clapping, because I've been manifesting a Greek wedding rather than everyone turning and looking like a Old West saloon.
Let me ask you guys this as a final roundtable discussion here. Is anybody up for sharing the conversation that they know they've been needing to have, that has the most results on the other side of it, but are not willing to have it because of the perceived difficulty of having it? Ray, for you, is that your brother? I'm gonna pass the ball around to anybody else who
yeah, man, that's my brother. Like 2 days ago, he was dropping off my mom, and I went up to the car to say hi, and he didn't roll down the window and just looked ahead and just kind of muttered obscenities at his girlfriend who was sitting next to him. So, that made me laugh. You're laughing, Wes, because it's like, he gave me such a gift.
He probably just didn't see you. That's probably what happened.
I am on Ozempic. No, and I was standing sideways. No. It was kind of a gift that he was acting so immature, because it gave me the opportunity to not, act immature. And it reminded me that, I don't know, man. It just reminded me that he is acting. I'm not the only one acting immature here. We both are. And I don't know why. That just, maybe it's sick, but it just gave me a sense of satisfaction that he was acting like a big baby in public, because I usually only do that in private. But that is a relationship that I will continue to try to heal. I'm not sure if I can have that breakthrough moment like Rob, like those little micro breakthrough moments, but I guess this conversation will summon the courage in me to just send another text.
Well, maybe it's an opportunity to practice writing him a letter. Maybe we just talked about it and started with it. Maybe you can write him something.
Yeah. And do I
don't know.
Do I put like a stink bug in the letter, or is it just like the letter?
I would think that if there's something you want to get off your chest, and like Wes said, with disclaimers and hey, it's coming from a place of love, I feel like potentially we've both been hurt here, and I'm just trying to bridge the gap, and maybe writing it is easier. I don't know. I'm just saying. It sounds like Phil,
you know what I'm going to do?
Too.
I'm going to write that letter as an act of kind of self-medication. I'm going to write that letter, and whether I post it, I don't know, but I can tell it will be a therapeutic exercise for me. Just to
sweet.
If Ray, if you're going to write it and it's negative, burn it when you're done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Otherwise, take the poison and wait for your brother to die.
Is that a good? Sorry, Wes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, it's a common thing talked about, resentment or hatred or anything. It's like, You're sitting there stewing over the stuff.
Oh, okay. I drink the poison and I'm expecting him to die.
Yes.
Yeah. And the poison is this kind of like festering wound in our family.
It's what you can't get over. It's what you're not allowing yourself to let go of.
Yeah. You see what you started, Rob?
Well, hey, I mean, what's interesting is I do feel a little bit better knowing I'm not the only one going through it. So I appreciate everyone being open and sharing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I'd be curious, Ray. I know you've been working on this problem for a while. I would be curious, number one, if you honestly feel like you've sufficiently tried to mend the relationship, and like being really precise and honest on whether or not that's the case. And if that is the case, I wonder from there if it's more of just a growing of yourself to accept certain things that you don't like. Because there is a real scenario where your brother just hates you for the rest of your life. That is a potential scenario. And are you willing to accept that?
Well, look, man, like, here's the deal. We used to party and drink and do drugs, and we stole a bunch of shit. I don't drink or do drugs anymore. I would like, but my vote is to return the stuff. His vote is to not return it until he has a separate issue solved. And so returning the stuff is like holding the stuff is his kind of like ace in the sleeve or whatever, or you know what I mean? Mm. And so I think, just thinking out loud, I need to, just like people have forgiven me for the shitty things I did when I used to party and drink and drug when I was younger. Maybe I need to forgive him. I think that's what I need to do. And just like, right? And stop chugging the poison. Because we're both kind of like waiting for I hate when people do this, but we're both waiting for the other person to apologize first. I don't know if you can relate to that, Rob. Right?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, man.
Do you think you'd be happier if you just told him the truth potentially and got it off your chest? Like, do you think there'd be any resolve for you personally, whether he takes it or not?
Of course. And Rob, Wes and I spent like 5 or 6 sessions on this. Remember the neighbor confrontation over the shared driveway, and screaming at him didn't help. Apologizing and have a civil conversation the next day changed everything. You know,
maybe just a baby step and letting him know you love him would help. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. Wes has really helped me with a lot of things, and we did it in like one call. So I think that's how like I avoided a lawsuit over, or like, you know, or like hurling dog poop over my fence. Like that's how I like Wes saved me from that too in one phone call. Yeah. Wes is like a borderline therapist, like with really good thoughts on that.
Wes is amazing, but he is not board certified. Just for anyone watching, he's the world's best non-board certified therapist. That's enough free non-board certified therapy for me. Let's continue, Wes.
Well, no, I mean, just to raise the topic of, there are real patterns in life that do result in a non-favorable outcome. And I think at that point of the flow chart, it's, are we willing to accept that non-favorable outcome? No different than we ask a child to accept when we tell them you cannot have the lollipop. Sorry.
Or I think of those of us who have fathers who either like abandon the family or constructively abandon the family, right? And like, I know, Wes, you have made peace with he's not coming to rescue you, or he's not coming to make good on his like fatherhood obligations, right? And my dad, having died, like I had to make peace with that he was not like Bill Cosby, America's dad, you know?
Yeah.
And putting that to rest is a huge relief.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of growing into actually being a man, of being able to accept stuff that you just don't like. You know, I mean, that's just sitting with the sadness
Exactly.
Or
Sitting with uncomfortable
whatever.
feelings.
Yep.
Like we talked
Exactly.
about that in 12-step recovery, but I think it's also like a Buddhist principle. Maybe Phil, can you like, is there something about like sitting with uncomfortable feelings and not letting them kind of like ruin your day? Is that kind of a Buddhist thing? Please say yes.
Well, it's Buddhist thing to.
He said, "Please say yes."
I mean, I guess so. It's a Buddhist thing to not become your emotions, to notice, to be practiced enough to be conscious all the time that your emotions are not you, which I think Americans in particular are very bad at. It seems like thinking that your thoughts are who you are. For some reason, Americans in particular always seem to me like we're the most like that for some reason. And Canada is just a part of America in my mind, Ray. So you're part of that.
Well, it's just like a superior America. It's like one nation under Canada, right? Isn't that what you guys say in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah, you're kind of like just snow Mexico, but whatever.
No, but I think what Wes and Rob and Larry and I are talking about, I think it really reminds me of what you say. In my own words, it's like to be able to sit with uncomfortable feelings and either A, not let them ruin your day, or B, not let them define you, or right, like let them wash through you without kind of washing you away.
Yeah, which is so much harder than it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Phil. It's much harder. No, the visual I always like is very commonly said in meditation type of things is like if you practice enough, you'll be able to get to a point where your emotions and your thoughts are a river, and you're sitting on the bank of the river watching them instead of being in the river going downstream. But I don't know.
Oh, dude, you should have stopped there, man. That was the perfect place to end. Wes, am I right?
Yeah, I would add a little piece that I've heard very similar visuals.
I love that, dude.
For some reason, it clicked a little bit more when a person told me it's not just the river, because that's supposed to be symbolic of your stream of consciousness. But then every once in a while, you have leaves that fall on the river. Like those are the thoughts that like pop up from the stream of consciousness, and you just watch them go by. So so that for some reason that little addition helped me as well.
Larry, Rob, did you guys want to add any frogs or chirping birds or anything, or have we perfected it?
I mean, that all is pretty profound.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point. I mean, I don't know if you guys can relate to this. Just final thought here. When I remind myself to detach from the outcome, I don't know about you guys, but I can physically feel like an exhale, like a release of, I'm about to tell Rob something. My biology wants to cling to something as a result of it, but it's like then using my prefrontal cortex to saying, no, just detach. And then say the thing with as much love and care as you can. But I don't know about you, but when I can literally feel that, and it's almost like my body just decompresses like a quarter of a centimeter, and it makes all the difference in the world.
I think people appreciate it more than you realize too. Like most people they're not accustomed to having someone tell them you could be 100% honest with no judgment. Like the person hearing that sometimes needs to believe it. Like you really have to be judgment free. You cannot say be 100% honest with me and then hold judgment.
Yeah.
And the key, you mentioned the key too, Wes, and that's where you come from. What's your intention? And if your intention is to come from love can't be fought. There's no way anybody's going to turn on you when it's genuine concern. And the metaphor that I use is that if I'm at a party with spinach in my teeth and people are looking at me strangely, nobody's telling me about it, but finally somebody comes up and goes, "Hey, Larry, you got spinach in your teeth." Who am I upset about? I'm upset about the people who didn't tell me. I'm not upset about the person that told me I had spinach in my teeth because they want me to be better. And that I think is what all of you are saying, and Rob is saying is that when you when you have these conversations, your intent is to help the person get better. And if you're coming through love, then you're not coming as a judgment or they flunked the test. And you're not going to get any reception when you put someone down or you make them feel less than. It's about lifting them up by helping them understand where you're coming from. Now, it's up to them how they choose to accept that. And that's what I hear you, Wes, saying on you not have to release that type of outcome and attachment, because otherwise you'll manipulate it to get that kind of attachment.
Yep.
And then you really haven't resolved anything.
Larry, that was a perfect thing to end on. Man, we could have a whole session on that. Like when you get attached to the outcome, you start to manipulate things. And that's what makes relationships a whole bunch of muddy water, man. When it's like that little bit of spin and you could defend it all day long. It's like, I didn't really, it's like, yes, you did. You spun it a little bit. You know damn well what you did. Because I've done the same thing in the past, So anyway, dudes, I love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Rob.
See you on Monday. Later.
Oh,